Hi, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about 8 things that you can negotiate that are not salary when you receive a job offer. We're also going to be chatting a little bit about why you might be negotiating some of these items and the different components that go into them so that you know exactly what to do when you are negotiating. It's important to think about total compensation when it comes to negotiating, not just your base salary. There are so many different components of comp, and if you're not thinking about the different aspects that go into how you're paid, you're going to be leaving items on the table, and we want to make sure that you're getting paid and that you're making as much money as you possibly can for the position that you're in and that you're being paid equitably. First up, sign-on bonus. So a sign-on bonus is a one-time payment that you receive from your employer at the beginning of your employment. If you receive a sign-on bonus, it'll most likely have some type of retention language tied to it. They want to make sure that you're not going to take this sign-on bonus, skedaddle and leave, and then they're going to have to start the entire interview process over again. So that retention language will say something like, you have to stay at the company for a full year. Otherwise, if you leave before then, you have to pay the money back. So how does negotiating a sign-on bonus come about? So the first way is that they might just offer one to you when they present you their offer letter. They might say, hey, we are so excited to have you come on board. We would like to offer you a $5,000 sign-on bonus. This is fantastic because it opens a doorway for you to negotiate right off the bat. You could let them know that you're extremely excited about the sign-on bonus, but you're hoping that they could perhaps bump it up to X number of dollars. However, if a company does not offer you a sign-on bonus up front, there are different ways that you can bring this up that would make sense for them to give you a sign-on bonus. So if you have to ask for one, a reason that you might want a sign-on bonus would be if you are leaving some money on the table at a previous company. Perhaps you have a retention bonus there or some other type of compensation that you would be missing out on by leaving. You could bring that up to your new employer when you're negotiating, letting them know that you're leaving that money out on the table and ask them to make up for it by providing you with a sign-on bonus. We'll talk more about this a little bit later as we go through the other items that you can negotiate. I think a lot of times we'll come back to the sign-on bonus because it's kind of one larger way that we can make a solve for you perhaps missing out on some money at your previous company when you're moving over to a new job. Which brings us to point number 2. The second thing that you can negotiate is your bonus proration. So what is a bonus proration? A lot of times when you start at a company mid-year, what'll happen is you are not eligible for the full year bonus. So a lot of times you have to start at the company on January 1st in order to be eligible for your full bonus. So for easy math, say you have a $100,000 a year salary and you have a 10% bonus target, that means you have a $10,000 bonus. If you start in January, that means that you would receive the full $10,000 if everything went perfectly well, right? The company performed well, your performance went well, etc. However, if you're joining a company mid-year, say you're joining as of July 1st, so exactly halfway through the year, what that company would do is they would prorate your bonus to 50% because you had only been at the company for half the year. So they wouldn't want to pay you for the first part of the year. They only want to pay you for the time that you've spent at the company. So something that you can negotiate is you can say, hey, by coming here mid-year, not only am I missing out on my full bonus from my last company, but I'm also going to be missing out on half a year bonus at this company. Is there any way that we could make sure that we're not prorating my bonus and I can get a full 100% of my bonus at the end of the year? This is a really great option if you bring up the sign-on bonus to start and the company isn't able to do that for you. However, then you could bring up the bonus proration aspect and say, okay, I understand you might not be able to meet me with a sign-on bonus. However, is there any way that we could not prorate my bonus when I get paid out at the end of the year? Which brings us to the third thing you can negotiate, which is very similar to bonus proration. It is your merit proration. So in the same way that a company will prorate your bonus, they will also prorate your merit increase. We definitely want to check in and make sure that they're not prorating our merit because in the United States, merit increases on an annual basis are already not that much money. They typically align with COLA or are below COLA, which is a cost of living increase. And this is typically around 2% to 3% increase every single year. So if there's anything you can do about it, you want to make sure that you're eligible for that full amount, for the full 2%, the full 3%. You don't want them to be prorating your merit so that at the end of the year, you're only eligible for 1% or 1.5% because it'll almost in a way set you behind and your salary won't go up with the cost of inflation. So what I would do is if at the same time you're asking for them not to prorate your bonus, you could also ask them to not prorate your merit so that you're eligible for the full amount. Something else that I want you to watch out for when you're going through this process is if you're getting hired in Q4 of any given year. So if you're getting hired in like October, November, December, a lot of times companies will not make you eligible for merit at all. So merit cycles go in a way that you finish the year, so they're January through December, and then compensation processes the merit and incentive or bonus awards January, February, March. And so if you start in October, November, December, they're not even budgeting for you to get an increase at all in that time, in the January, February, March timeframe, and you would have to actually wait until the next January, February, March in order to be eligible for a merit increase. So I would just make sure that even if you don't feel comfortable negotiating this aspect, or at least asking them about it, asking them if your merit increase, if you will be budgeted into your salary number that you are being provided when you start in October, November, December. And if it's not, you could perhaps ask if they would bump your salary up a little bit to account for the fact that you won't be eligible in order to receive a merit increase for an extended period of time. The fourth thing you might not have known that you can negotiate is paid time off. So when you receive a job offer, what they'll typically do is send you a benefits guide along with your offer. Sometimes they'll send it a little bit ahead of time. What I do is I immediately flip to the paid time off section to understand how their paid time off policy works. If you have unlimited PTO, that's, one of its own thing. You can't negotiate this necessarily. However, a lot of times companies will have a tiered PTO system. So what this means is that if you've been at a company from 1 to 3 years, you're eligible for X number of days. Once you hit 4 years, you go up to the next tier and you get an additional 4 days, and so on and so forth. So how I've negotiated this is I've said, okay, I understand that when I first start, I'm falling into this 1 to 3 years of PTO category, say it's 15 days. However, I want to be in the next category up. I want to immediately start with 20 days of PTO if they jump it up 5 days. So what I'll ask is I will say, hey, I noticed that you have a tiered PTO system. At my last company, I was at X number of days of PTO, and you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. It's just the way I like to do it. I was at X number of days of PTO. Would you be able to bump me up to the next tier of PTO so that I can start off with 20 days of PTO instead of starting off with 15 days of PTO? This isn't typically that hard of a switch for HR, and they can just adjust it on the back end, and then voila, you already have additional PTO. If you don't take your PTO, using this hack is still extremely helpful, and the reason for that is because when you have PTO, it accumulates over time, and at some companies even it rolls over from year to year. So even if you're not using a lot of your PTO, you can still allow your PTO to accrue over time, and companies by law are required to pay out your PTO. So what that means is when you're leaving a company, if you have a bunch of PTO accrued, they have to pay you that out, and it's almost like an additional bonus check. So it's definitely worth it to try and negotiate additional PTO into your contract. Not only because you deserve the additional time off, but because when you leave the company, it's additional money in your pocket. Next up, we have an education stipend. So if you are passionate about learning and development, this one's for you. Again, similar to PTO, after you receive your offer, what I would do is check the benefits guide to see if they have any type of formal education stipend program. Some companies will allocate a certain amount of money per year for employees once they apply and get accepted to the program that they can spend on education. If this isn't the case and you don't see anything in there, when you're negotiating or having a conversation about your offer, you can ask whether or not they have an education stipend policy for its employees, because you're really interested in learning and growing at the company, and you want to continue to develop your skills, which is why you're asking, because there are certain things that you're interested in learning and you're wondering if the company would support you through that. Some companies might just say no right off the bat. However, they might also say that it comes on a case-by-case basis and that it's something you could revisit later on. I would push a little bit here so that you could better understand, what's kind of happening or what their policy is. It could just be that for the current year that you're in, they don't have any education budgeted, but you could ask whether or not you can bring it up during budget season. If there's a conference you want to go to, there's coursework that you want to do, and you could ask them later on. Other companies will have programs where they will completely pay for your MBAs. I have a friend who's specifically doing this at her company where they are paying for her MBA in its entirety. So know that those opportunities are out there, and all you have to do is ask to get a better understanding of the company's philosophy on educating its folks. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about the annual bonus target. So depending on the organization, you might receive an annual bonus target. And we've mentioned this a little bit before when we talked about bonus proration. However, this differs in that you would be negotiating the actual percent target that you would receive at the end of the year. So for example, they might offer you a 5% target, and you might ask if they are open to, or it's a possibility for you to get a 10% target, a 15% target. So it's really focusing on that target so that at the end of the year, you have the more potential, more upside for getting additional money if you perform and the company performs. Coming from a compensation perspective, if you are negotiating this, I would say only try to negotiate up 5%. And the reason I say that is a lot of times they have very set parameters for bonus targets, and so they don't vary a lot. So the negotiation window is smaller, but even 5% more could make a really big impact. Going back to that example of making $100,000 a year, again, easy math, times a 5% bonus is $5,000, times a 10% bonus is $10,000. And so just by negotiating your percent from 5 to 10, you are giving yourself an opportunity to make $5,000 more a year, which I think is pretty great. If they don't offer you a bonus target to start, you could always bring it up, ask if it's something that is an option. It's possible that your position isn't eligible for a bonus target. Not every job in an organization is eligible for a bonus target, and that's okay. But it would be important to understand if you're eligible or not. If you are eligible, then say, hey, I would really love to have a bonus target. Like, what is a target for somebody in my level at my position? If they say no, you're not eligible for a bonus, then what I would follow up with and ask is, when does somebody in my career path become bonus eligible? So that you have that information later on. If you're ever promoted into a higher level job, you can understand what to expect at that point and make sure that you are still being compensated appropriately later on when you're growing at the company. So another compensation component that you can negotiate is equity. And before we go into kind of how to negotiate equity and what it means to negotiate equity, I think we need to talk just a little bit about what equity is. So equity is a stock or a share that represents ownership in a company. So you would receive equity potentially if you're working at a public company. Sometimes they'll give it out at private companies, but it only goes to top level executives. So equity can be bought in the market, and it can be gifted or awarded by a company that you're working for. Again, like I said, this type of compensation is typically awarded to folks in higher level positions. Sometimes the cutoff is at like a director level and above if you're at like a smaller company. But if you're at a startup or a tech company, a lot of times the value proposition that they're offering you to come on board of this company is giving you some type of equity before they're a public company, so that when they go public, you have a rather large upside. It's sometimes how they get away with giving you a lower base salary, because they're saying, hey, we're giving you all of this equity, so you're gonna have a massive upside when we go public, and that's gonna be really advantageous. So keep that in mind when you are interviewing at companies, that this might come up in different capacities. Okay, so one more thing about equity, it's usually broken down into different types of awards. You can either have restricted stock units or RSUs, stock options, or you can have performance share units, which again, that performance share units specifically go to C-suite level employees from what I've seen. And I'm happy to do a video specifically about equity and what that looks like. Just make sure to hit the like button if you want to see that video, and I'll be sure to make it. You can also head over to my Instagram. The link will be in the description box, where I've done a thorough breakdown of what each different types of awards are and why, you know, a company might be awarding one or another to you. All right, but back to negotiating equity, because that's what we're talking about here, what it means to negotiate. If you've received a job offer at a public company and it doesn't include equity, it's something that I would recommend asking about if you're at like a mid-level type of job. So, you know, like more of a senior level analyst or a manager, senior manager type of level. That's where it's potentially possible where you might start becoming eligible. Any job below that, you would most likely not be eligible for equity until you've been promoted up through the organization into a higher level role. So if you receive an offer and it already has an equity award in it, there are a couple things besides the amount that you can negotiate. For example, if they offer you an award that's $50,000, not only can you negotiate the amount, you could say instead of $50,000, I'd like $75,000. You can also negotiate the vest period, so however many years it takes for that to vest, and you can request a specific type of award. So I would recommend not only negotiating the dollar amount, but also a shorter vest period. So say it could vest in a year instead of in 3 years. And when you're looking for a specific type of award, there's a difference between RSUs and options, in that options you only receive an upside, whereas RSUs it's a 1-to-1. So sometimes it is more beneficial, or I've seen like higher level folks negotiate in order to receive RSUs for their sign-on equity grant. In addition to a sign-on equity grant, you can also receive an annual grant. Similar to a bonus target, you get an equity target on an annual basis, so make sure that you ask about that as well. Something to note is that some companies have very strict policies around equity awards, so you might try to negotiate this and they will not budge at all. Just know that that's normal. Be happy that you asked and just gather as much information as you can so that later on, when you're negotiating equity for a job at another company or you're getting promoted within the same company, you know what you're eligible for and what you're not. And then one last point to consider about equity is if you're coming from a public company where you have received equity awards, what I would say is that you should bring this up during the offer stage at your new public company. Let them know how much money you would be leaving on the table by exiting your previous public company, and ask them if they're willing to match that amount in a sign-on equity award. If they're not willing to do that, it's also possible that they would give you a sign-on bonus. See, I told you we'd come back to that. So they might also give you just the amount in cash to true you up in a way to make sure that you're not losing any of your compensation by switching to their organization. Just make sure to do whatever you can not to lose money by moving to one organization to the next. Again, it's very common to, during the offer stage, let them know what you're missing from your offer letter if you're going to be losing money by moving from your previous company to your new company. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about negotiating is work from home status. I know we've been working from home for an extended period of time because of the pandemic. However, a lot of companies are still onboarding folks with the expectation that we're going back into the office. The job market is so hot right now that they're willing and they're happy to put in your offer letter that you can continue to work from home even though everybody else is going to go back into the office. I've seen this happen before, so much as very recently at my company, and I wish I would have done it when I was negotiating. So if you enjoy working from home and want to continue working from home, make sure that you bring it up during the offer stage, because they can write it into your offer letter that your expectation is that you will be working from home full time, or maybe it's that, you want to work from home 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and you'll come into the office once a week, once a month, whatever it is that makes sense for you and whatever makes you happiest when working. If there's anything that you get out of this video, what I want you to know is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask. Negotiating can be intimidating and really scary, but if you are negotiating with an organization that values pay, values its employees, and wants to be more transparent about pay, they're not going to have a hard time having these conversations. So if you are in an interview process, you get to the offer stage and someone isn't being kind to you, I just encourage you to keep in mind that they're going to be the nicest to you during the offer stage. If it kind of all goes awry at this point because you're having questions about compensation and you want to make sure that you're being compensated fairly, just keep that in the back of your head. Maybe it's not the right company for you. Maybe it still is, and that's okay, but it's just something to note and have in mind. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you liked this content, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. Also, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below on any other videos you would like to see in the future. Thank you. Bye.